Did you know that you're no more likely, if you're devout, to have a near-death experience than someone who is not devout? Did you know that?
Well, isn't that interesting?
Hi,
Hello,
I'm Purple Trader.
I'm Ash.
She is from Experience Required on Spotify and all the things.
All the things. We're out there.
And yeah. And I'm on Twitch and YouTube and Spotify. And I just found out I was on Google Music. I didn't know that.
Oh.
Yeah. And guess what else?
What?
I have a listener in New Zealand.
Dope.
I know. Anyway, I'm a star. So, just so you guys know that.
Congratulations.
Yeah. Today, we're talking about near-death experiences and the spirituality, psychology, and biology of that. If you hear anything, the inspiration is above us. That's our children making noises. They're having a sleepover. Okay, so let's start off, I guess. We'll go basic. What is a near-death experience to you?
Well, I don't know that I've had one.
Yeah.
But my understanding is like an out-of-body experience, which is like viewing yourself or your body from a like third-person perspective.
Yeah. The definition is very close to that. It's can be either. It usually occurs during reversible clinical death.
Okay.
So now they're quantifying that as no blood flow or oxygen to the brain.
Mm-hmm.
But, after your heart stops.
Fun fact.
Yes.
It's also comparable to a dissociative episode, which I have had, and it's a fucking trip. So.
So these experiences could be positive. These are experiences that the person they're actually perceiving, which are the majority of them are positive. They include detachment from the body, feelings of levitation, which are, like seeing the doctors operating on you.
Mm-hmm.
Serenity, security, warmth, joy, experiences of absolute dissolution, review of major life events. So, like, my life flashed before my eyes.
It was horribly boring.
It's very boring. The presence of light, and seeing dead relatives. So, I don't know if that's positive, but seeing dead relatives. But it also could be negative, which is not very frequent, I guess. Including sensations of anguish, distress, a void, devastation, a vast emptiness, seeing hellish places, and the devil. So, that's a stark contrast.
Like a bad trip.
Yeah. And it said, the statistic I found was that 10 to 20% of people who had who have come close to death have had these near-death experiences. So, that's not
Not a lot
of people in general. I mean, how many people have actually had clinical death, come back, and had a near-death experience?
Yeah.
Like, I should have gotten that statistic. How many people have had clinical death and come back? But, I mean, I wouldn't assume it would be very many. But, I don't have, usually I have some history, but there's not very much history, at least biologically. I mean, I think throughout time, everybody's had, I mean, historically, it's a well-known thing, near-death experiences.
Yeah.
But clinically, there's not a lot of history to it.
Yeah.
There was only, so near-death experience, NDE, by the way. Near-death experiences were described as a clinical syndrome by Albert Heim in 1892. That was the first time it was described as a clinical syndrome. And that was by just observations by workers falling off scaffolds, war soldiers, climbers who fell, you know. And then it just jumps to 1968. So, Celia Green published analysis of 400 out-of-body experiences, which is not exactly the same, because you can have an out-of-body experience
without dying.
Yeah, like you can be in surgery and have an out-of-body experience.
Or have a dissociative episode.
Right. And the thing about this is that she kind of said that it was a perceptual experience or a hallucination. So there was really no thought as to why these things were happening. It was just kind of like, you're hallucinating, but 400 people experienced it. So,
right.
You know. And then 1969, the Swiss-American psychiatrist Elizabeth Kubler-Ross published On Death and Dying, What the Dying have to Teach Doctors, Nurses, Clergy, and Their Own Families. And then 1975, near-death experiences was popularized, the actual phrase near-death experience was popularized by psychiatrist Raymond Moody. He's actually a pretty big guy in this. He did a lot of research on it, and I'm going to come back full circle on this guy. But he used it as an umbrella term for out-of-body experiences. And panoramic life review, so, you know, flashbacks, and the tunnel, and the light. So, that's basically it for history. I mean, there's not really much progress. There's a lot of studies on it, though.
Yeah, I read about a few.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of comparisons that are made to, like, there is a really interesting, really cool book that I read about a year ago, and it's about mushrooms. But there have been studies surrounding the the similarities between a psilocybin trip and
Yeah.
a near-death experience.
Oh, yeah.
And, like, with, brain activity measurement under, those specific sets of circumstances.
Right.
The difference between a hallucination and what an out-of-body experience actually is perceptively in the brain.
Right. I read in one of the articles that I read, I believe it was the Scientific American article.
Mm-hmm.
They were talking about that, how it was almost exactly like psilocybin.
Yeah.
And when you, like, because when they asked people to recall what a near-death experience was like, they said there was actually a 2017 study at the University of Virginia, and they compared the memories of experiences with real and imagined
Mm-hmm.
Memories, and the near-death experiences recalled had greater vividness
Mm-hmm.
and detail. So they felt it and they perceived it in a much greater, and they're
With more lucidity.
yeah.
Yeah.
So it's just like, and clarity.
Mm-hmm.
Well,
also, like, I read a few things about, like, life after having a near-death experience.
Mm-hmm.
And there are correlations there as well that actually have credited psychedelics as a therapeutic option.
Right.
Because of the similarities of the experience.
Oh, that makes sense. Well, and they say too that after you have this near-death experience, they have a more increased sense of purpose.
Mm-hmm.
Like, because it's almost like having a therapeutic, almost like having, a mushroom trip or whatever, a therapeutic mushroom trip.
Mm-hmm.
You have like a more increased sense of purpose, appreciation for life, and less fearful of death, which I would think is weird, but
well, I think it would, like, offer some comfort. It's the needing to have answers.
right,
Like,
right. What's gonna happen?
Yeah.
And I know what's gonna happen.
And so if you have the experience and then you're like, damn, that was peaceful.
Yeah.
You're almost excited about it. Like.
Yeah. So that Moody, I already forgot his name, his first name. Let's check these notes. Anyway, Raymond Moody. He said that there were 9 stages
Mm-hmm.
to near-death experiences, like when you're actually having the experience.
Okay.
Sudden peace and relief from pain. Perception of a relaxing sound, like maybe music. Yeah. Consciousness. No, maybe music. It could be something else.
I would think it's subjective. Like,
yeah.
The whole experience overall is subjective to each individual.
Right. Consciousness or spirit ascending, so remote viewing. So, like, that's the start of your out-of-body experience. leaving the earthly realm,
Mm-hmm.
and then arriving at a heavenly place. So whatever your idea of heavenly is,
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't necessarily have to be heaven, but
Yeah.
um, met by people of the light, usually deceased family members and friends. Or it could be angels. It could be just anything else.
Your favorite band?
Yeah. Meeting with a deity.
Mm-hmm.
So, whatever that means to you as well. And then life review. And then returning to your earthly body. That's when you get resuscitated.
Mm-hmm.
What's strange to me too is like all of this is happening within a minute.
Yeah.
But it seems like hours or
Yeah.
you
Well,
know.
I mean, just like when you're tripping, it feels like an eternity is going by, and you have like no perception of time
Right.
or time passing, and that's why it feels like you could experience the entirety of your life again
Right.
in 4 to 8 hours. Like,
Right. Right. Um, Kenneth Ring, he made it a lot simpler. Peace, body separation, entering darkness, seeing the light, entering another realm of existence, and then being resuscitated. They both were quick to say not everybody experiences all the stages,
mm-hmm.
and not necessarily in order.
Well, not everybody has that period. Like,
Right. So, um, I part of this too is like how biologically is this happening?
mm-hmm.
Um, one of the things that you can think like low oxygen levels, is kind of you can even like not make yourself, but I mean, people can start getting tunnel vision or like inducing parts of this by you know about if they're about to pass out, you can get that tunnel vision.
Well, and also, like, this could be theoretically simulated with like breath work.
Mm-hmm.
Or, like I've seen comparisons drawn between a near-death experience and like astral projection.
Mm-hmm.
If you like subscribe to that idea.
Yeah. They've also done it with the in the 5G, or what is it? The G-force,
like zero G thing,
where they put them in the centrifugal force. Put the pilots in there,
mm-hmm.
and then they spin them around.
Yeah,
they've done that, and they have that the closest near-death experience that they can get. It's like they called it near-death light. So,
well, it's interesting because like all of these other things that could potentially simulate like a similar experience would in fact induce hallucinations.
Right.
But near-death experiences are like specifically considered different than
Right.
like biologically different responses.
Here's one of the things that was really interesting to me was the theory that it's similar to a seizure, complex partial seizure. So that's different than like a generalized seizure. It's a focal seizure. So it starts in one part of your brain and then it goes, it starts here and then it goes in different parts, right? Yes, this is live. So it goes.
Oh, are we supposed to?
What?
Are we supposed to respond?
Yes.
Okay. My bad.
So, so it starts in one part of your brain and goes around, right?
Uh-huh.
So the theory is, in a near-death experience, just like a seizure, it will shut down each part of your brain, like, kind of like shutting down a city block, and each of their power, the power goes down in each part.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. So your brain is or the person having the near-death experience, this part of their brain over here is still telling a story.
Okay.
But not completely.
Right.
And so that's why they're having these thoughts that aren't necessarily complete.
Mm-hmm.
Because this, it's trying to complete a story. It's trying to make up a story.
Mm-hmm.
But it can't. It's not a real one.
Right.
And so that's why it's a near, that's why it seems so real. It's real to them.
Mm-hmm.
And actually, so when Dostoevsky, the writer, the author, he was epileptic, and he had that kind of, epilepsy.
Mm-hmm.
He had, and part of that are auras, and so people who have auras like that, some of them can get really, really happy and joyous, and that's their type of aura.
Mm-hmm.
One of his friends said, during his epileptic fits, or rather immediately preceding them, he had always experienced a moment or two when his whole heart seemed to wake up to vigor and light, when he became filled with joy and hope, and all his anxieties seemed to be swept away forever. So that's kind of like almost like a near-death experience, right? But that was just a second before he would have a seizure.
Yeah. That's wild.
Yeah. And scientists now can simulate, like, put an electrode on somebody's brain, an epileptic's brain, and simulate those auras and make them feel joyous and happy and have those elated feelings. And they can also simulate in other parts of the brain the out-of-body experiences.
Wow.
Yeah, and hallucinations. So, I mean, that is kind of crazy that, so I feel like that makes sense because your neurons are trying to talk to each other and there's no bridge.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
And so it's making its own bridge. And that's why you're seeing those things or you're feeling those things. And it makes sense why people are seeing and feeling those things at the same time. Like they're all seeing and feeling the same things.
Right.
And why only 10% are feeling and seeing the same things, because not everybody is dying the same way.
Yeah.
Like, if you are dying immediately or, you're coming back, maybe those neurons didn't shut down. And so you didn't have that near-death experience.
Yeah. Well, and I would imagine, like, different, like, the physiology of, like, your particular cause of death would be
Right.
would like interfere with your brain's perception of what's going on.
Right. Right. Um, speaking of, well, and this all comes back to though, like, your perception. If you're a spiritual person to begin with,
Mm-hmm.
so like, or not a spiritual person, you could say, "Oh my God, I saw all these things," and that could have been God.
Yeah.
It was, I think it said 48%. 46% of people in America believe in guardian angels.
Mm-hmm.
So even if, like, maybe, like, I don't believe in guardian angels, but if, like, my mom my entire life has been telling me that I have a guardian angel, and then I have a near-death experience,
Mm-hmm.
I'd be like, oh, well, that,
Yeah.
After seeing something like that and nobody really understands it,
Mm-hmm.
So I think your physiology is slightly different than somebody else's, which affects your perception
Mm-hmm.
because people can't really explain it, right?
Right.
So it affects your perception, which affects your spirituality.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, I think this is like, I think going into the spirituality part is really weird because it's a huge difference than what the scientists are saying and the psychologists and the
Yeah.
like
Mm-hmm.
there's two different lines of it. Like the like you were talking about the astral projection stuff. And I had one here talking about, I was reading the whole article, and then I was like, and then they started talking about life energy, and I was like, wait a minute. This ain't right.
Well, like that one I was reading that was written by a pastor.
Yeah.
It was like, this NEDs or NDs or whatever are a gift from God and blah, blah, blah. Like, pardon?
Yeah, gift from God. I don't know.
Well, and I mean, it's still largely considered a phenomenon, right? Like, it's totally subjective. The experiences are exclusive to differing individuals.
Right.
And, like we were talking about earlier, if you get into, like, the whole belief thing, like, what is it to truly believe something? Like, so much so that in your final moments on this earth, you experience it. Like, you've had no evidence that your belief is true or valid or whatever, and then you experience it as you're dying.
Right.
Or, like, if you believe in reincarnation, the light could just be you being immediately reborn. Like,
right. Well, I mean, what I find interesting about all of this too is like how similar all of these things are, right? Mm-hmm. Like, because religion, for the most part, in the grand scheme of things, is all pretty similar, Like,
oh yeah.
So everything can kind of be interpreted. Like, some people find near-death experiences, see their guardian angel, and others see the god of death. But is that really much different from each other. Like,
Right.
or your dead relatives, or, I mean, how different really is it? If they see a deity, you know, how is that?
So then it could literally be anything that you have, like,
Some preconceived notion of.
well, you know, a cognition of, like,
Yeah.
it's some, you know, even if you don't, like, believe in it,
Yeah.
just the fact that it ever
Crap.
took up space in your fucking brain,
Right.
you could potentially experience it at the end of your life.
Right. Well, I was watching this show the other day. It was the new Cold Case Files. This lady, she was like, her son was. They said that he went missing in a lake, and his mom, who was like 87 and a half years old, she was like, I knew he wasn't dead. I knew he wasn't dead. I went out to the lake, and somebody just told me he's not dead. But he was dead, just not in the lake. Like,
yeah.
I mean, you just don't want him to be dead.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, it's just your deepest, darkest desires, like, you know, just your thoughts, you know.
Yeah.
Your brain just took a whole bunch of shrooms and no.
Yep.
Like,
a heroic dose and
well, one of the things you have to think about too is when these people are in near-death experiences, you can't say that, I mean, they're on a lot of medications to save their lives. You know, their bodies are going through a lot of trauma. And it's not to discount that, I mean, obviously these things are happening. You know, they're going, I mean, they're obviously seeing these things, but are the things that they're seeing that intense? Or is some of this stuff side effects? Is it like...
Well, and like people that are, you know, they have an out-of-body experience or a near-death experience or what have you, like, while undergoing an operation.
Right.
They're under heavy anesthesia.
Right.
You know, and you know, like, while you're under anesthesia, they're preemptively pumping pain medication into your IV so that you don't, like, come back to consciousness in severe pain. Like,
right. I mean, how can that not be? Well, and think about, like, the anxiousness you're going to have going into surgery. Like, or the anxiety going into surgery. How many times have you seen those shows where they're, I had this out of body, I saw the doctors operating on me, you know, so then it becomes, you have that notion in your head. You have that.
Yeah.
And it may be some sort of dream hallucination, I don't know what you would call it, where you're out dreaming
like a lucid dream.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like,
which is another very interesting topic.
But I mean, I don't know if you, like, I feel like it's a really hard subject to figure out because I think that people obviously are experiencing these things because there are a lot of documented, it's been documented multiple times
But then there's also the possibility of these people, like, seeking out this information, right? Like
Right.
we did.
Right.
Or hearing about it or whatever. And just the fact that that knowledge that, like, this may possibly have ever happened to somebody
Right. Well,
induces some sort of response, like, in a similar situation.
well, the first study, it was all just anecdotal. It was all just, hey, have you had a near death experience?
Mm-hmm.
You fell off a ladder? Like,
yeah.
They didn't even know if they were clinically dead or not.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I could be like, oh, yeah, I had a near death experience, like,
right.
the time I wanted to. You know,
Mm-hmm.
I had to go to work yesterday. I had a near death experience. You know?
Just driving.
Yeah. But, I mean, I don't think that there's anything. I think that's why it's so difficult with this subject, is because when I don't know about you, but when I was searching for things, it was just kind of, yeah, it happens, but we don't really know why. And I mean, they've actually acknowledged that it happens,
Yeah.
but they can't really replicate it.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, other than that one, but they can't really replicate, because how unethical is that? Let me try and kill you and bring you back.
Right. Well, and like that study I told you I read about, where a team they were monitoring brain activity of people in a hospital that were like they were already dying, you know,
Right.
flatlining, you know, measure their brain activity while undergoing resuscitation, and out of, you know, 58 people that they tried to conduct this study on, only 20 of them survived.
Right.
And of the 20, only like 7 or 8, claimed to have had a near-death experience.
Right. Well, the other thing too is, and I didn't really go too much into this with my research, but you have, I mean, think about the people who work in hospice,
Mm-hmm.
and there are definite stages of a person's death. You know, there are, you know, where like when people like seem to get better, like the day or two before,
Mm-hmm.
and they see their relatives and
Yeah.
things like that. And it's not everybody. It's, I mean, but a lot of them.
Yeah.
You know, and then reconciling with their family, and you know,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, not reconciling, but you know, saying their goodbyes and
Yeah.
things like that, and then they pass on.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I mean, that's a well-known fact that there are stages, and
right.
I mean, I should have looked into that more, but I mean, obviously, you can't get people back from that, from hospice, to ask them, you know, what was that like? But I feel like that's kind of the same thing, where your mind is losing neurons little by little.
Yeah. So, like, with my grandma,
Mm-hmm.
I took care of her for the last 6 months that she was alive, and she was bedridden, and, you know, she was on hospice, but I was doing the caregiving
Mm-hmm.
the whole time, and the hospice was really just like administering medication and whatever, like checking in. and she would be, you know, like relatively unresponsive for days at a time.
Yeah.
And she was on a hell of a fucking cocktail of medication,
Yeah.
mind you. So while she, like, she was conscious, right?
Yeah.
She was not always responsive, and sometimes she would just lay in bed and stare at the ceiling, and then if you try to talk to her, she would say some wild ass shit. Like,
Yeah.
one day I was cleaning and she was kind of like mumbling, and I thought she was trying to get my attention, so I walked over and grabbed her hand to let her know I was there, and I was like, "What is it, Grandma? Do you need something?" And she was like, it was like she was gone, and then when I touched her, she kind of like snapped back to reality.
Mm-hmm.
And she told me she was sweeping the floors of heaven, like, that she was like prepping her space in heaven.
Yeah. Weird.
Like, all right, well, I'll let you get back to it, I guess.
Do you need a dustpan? I'll go get one from the nurse.
So, there's like, you know, the claims of near-death experiences are specifically when someone is clinically dead.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
But what about, like, the progression of a disease up until death?
Yeah.
Like what my grandma had. Like,
Right.
or, you know, people with dementia. What are they experiencing?
Right. Right. Well, I mean, that leads to another question, too, is, and I hate, like, saying this kind of stuff because I feel like I'm discrediting people, but, you know, what does clinical death do to your brain?
Mm-hmm.
Like, I mean, that's a pretty traumatic thing for your brain. You know, if you're...
Well, and, like, what about if you're in a coma?
Yeah.
You know, you're technically alive because of, you know, machines and shit that you're hooked up to, but... And you have brain activity, but you're not considered conscious.
Right.
So, where are you?
Yeah. This kind of like, I feel like this stuff kind of ties back to the memory stuff too, because even if your mind is good and you have no damage whatsoever afterwards,
Mm-hmm.
you still can't rely on that memory.
Right.
Because it's not... no memory... memory is just a perception. And of what you... You know, it's not real. Like...
Yeah, like, every time you recall a memory, you're not remembering the thing.
Yeah.
Itself. You're remembering the last time you recalled it.
Right.
And over time, you know, you might, like, embellish it a little or remember it a little differently than you used to. Or even, like, outside influence.
Yeah.
Could interfere with how you recall that specific memory.
Well, especially, too, when they're like, there's no way to describe this. There's no way to describe this.
Mm-hmm.
And you're remembering it. If you can't describe it, how are you remembering something you can't describe. Like, I have a really hard time recalling smells,
Mm-hmm.
like, not necessarily like sight,
Mm-hmm.
but smell and taste, recalling that. But, like, if I taste something or if I smell something, it'll bring back a memory.
Mm-hmm.
But, like, things that are, like, I can't recall something. I can't be like, let me remember what that tastes like. And I can't do that. I don't know if you can.
I think I don't think I can, but I do get that like trigger of like a taste or a smell,
Yeah.
specifically smells, because my nose is really sensitive. But I can also like when I smell or taste something, I can like piece apart a smell
Yeah.
or a taste.
Yeah. But like,
But I can't like.
But when I say vinegar,
Yeah.
when I say vinegar, like.
Oh, that one does it. Immediately, my mouth was like gross.
But, or like, okay, if I say like apple pie, can you like describe, other than describing apple pie and the way it tastes? I mean,
I can almost smell it when you say it.
right. But
I've never tried this before. It's very weird.
So I mean, it's but like if you tasted an apple pie, it would bring you back to a memory.
Right.
So like when somebody says I had a near-death experience and I can't tell you what I experienced.
Mm-hmm.
That's what I feel like is like, it's kind of like what we're trying to do now.
Mm-hmm.
Where
you're taking like something very
sensory,
abstract.
Yeah.
Out of like the physiology of being a human being.
Yeah. And
then it's like, what the fuck is that even?
Yeah, like how can you remember it, though?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, just like, okay.
Because you have nothing to link it to.
I've had this conversation before about vision, right? Like, and, people that are born blind versus people that lose their eyesight over time.
Right.
Your eyes perceive, like, light and reflection and colors and this and that, and relay information to your brain.
Mm-hmm.
But without, like, a base knowledge of a given object, would you technically see the thing? Because, like, your brain, while your eyes are taking in information and relaying it to your brain is what dictates what you are looking at.
You mean
based on knowledge that you have. Like, if you had never seen, like some version of a planet before.
Right.
And you were, like, you'd never seen that before. You didn't even know about space or planets or any of that shit. Like, all you know is what's here. And then somebody hangs that on the wall. Mm-hmm. It's not just that you don't know what it is. Like, how would your eyes communicate something that your brain doesn't have knowledge of to your brain? Other than color or shape.
Right.
So then if you cannot see, how do you, like, experience the world around you without knowledge of everything, you know, like, of all the things? Because technically it's your brain that does the seeing, right? But just, I don't want to get into the whole thing. It's just, like, taking such an abstract concept out of the physiology of being a human being.
Yeah. It's like, it's, to simplify, it's like trying to tell a blind person who's been blind since birth that this is, my sweater is blue.
Yeah, and how do you describe blue?
Yeah.
Because they haven't seen the sky.
Yeah.
Or any fucking thing else blue. Like, how do you describe it without the knowledge of things that are blue?
Right.
Or, like, red.
Right.
Or, you know, anything. Like,
yeah.
The other day I was, like, Henry read something online and then randomly asked me to, like, do the thing that he read. And it was something like, describe how something tastes without using, like,
taste words.
Well, like, smell words. So, like, or taste words, I guess. I don't know, because it's, like, smell and taste are so intertwined with each other. But, like, if you ate a peanut...
Right.
You couldn't describe it as salty or nutty or...
crunchy.
Like, how...
Yeah.
It kind of breaks your brain a little bit.
Yeah. Well, I mean... Well, that's why it's kind of... I feel like you can't... Especially as time goes on... You can't really trust the memory that somebody has of their near-death experience. And some of these, at least the ones that I've seen, the testimonials are 20 years, 30 years.
Right.
Because they are few and far between. I mean, 10 to 20% of people who have been resuscitated... that's like... do you know anybody who's been resuscitated? I don't. Like, from death?
No.
Like...
I mean, not that I know of. I don't usually ask people, like, have you died before, but, you know.
Do you want to? Because I can make that happen.
Let's just try something real quick.
Yeah. I mean, that's just crazy. But,
yeah.
Anyway.
Well, and not to mention that just like with, you know, paranormal experiences or what, like any experience that anyone has, like, especially when it comes to writing a fucking book or doing a docuseries or doing a, you know, dramatic reenactment or whatever, like, how much of it is fucking embellished to sell it, like, because it's not interesting, like, it might be real fucking interesting to you, because it happened to you, but without, like, all the extra shit, you know, how do you convince other people?
Right.
if you can't make it appealing. Like,
Right. Right. Well, and I mean, it could be that the person is just like, yeah, I mean, I went into the light and it was just a light bulb.
and I looked down and I was a moth.
Yeah.
I mean,
could you spice this up a little bit?
Yeah, like, never mind how fucking weird dreams are, because that is a mix of information from your conscious mind
Yeah.
and shit that your subconscious just fucking makes up. Like,
I really try hard to limit my dreams that I relay to 3 sentences or less. Because as interesting as your dreams are to you, 95% of the time they are not interesting to other people. I'm just saying. Unless your husband is Triple H. And he's trying to take out, what was that guy's name? I forget him already, see? Not interesting. But, yeah, I mean, it's, anyway. I forgot where we were going with that. I had a near-death experience.
just right now?
Just right now, trying to remember my dream.
How was it?
Meh. I'm not gonna get a show out of it. Alright, well, I think that's about all I have. What fact did you find interesting?
I mean, the whole thing is really interesting.
Okay,
But particularly, like, the subjectiveness
Yeah.
of the alleged experience.
Yeah. I thought the whole epilepsy thing was interesting.
Oh, yeah.
I thought that was like, I think that's what made the most sense to me. Is like how it's kind of like your brain is shutting down, and that's why people are seeing things. That makes the most sense to me.
Yeah.
But could be my perception.
Could be.
Yeah. I'm Purple Trader 3169.
I'm Ash from Experience Required. Also, Merc Little on Twitch.
Don't forget to follow, like, subscribe. I think I forgot to say that again in the beginning.
They know.
They know.
Y'all know how this goes.
You better. Have a good night.
Okay, bye.
Bye.